for all intents and purposes, the school took a cut of $300,000 is what I'm looking at.
Well, you know, if you look at, depending, if you look at the cuts that general government took, that's almost that dollar amount. It's a shift in revenue. I can't, I apologize, I can't buy into that. It's a shift in revenue.
So you
All things being equal, if general government were level funded, if everything stayed the same, the only thing that changed was Chapter 70 grew. Chapter 70 grew, then that would say the budget should grow. Right? Is that what you're saying? If everything else stayed the same and Chapter 70 increased just $100,000, then the budget needs to grow $100,000.
I guess what I'm saying is if the school committee comes in and says we're going to level fund, and then the state turns around and says you're increasing your Chapter 70 aid because of increased student enrollment, then the Chapter 70 aid increases to the school department because they have the greater need, because they have the greater increase in level of services.
But
That money's already included. The entire amount of Chapter 78 that was provided by the state is in the school budget.
The increase wasn't indicated until after they proposed this level funded budget.
So in other words, you say we should level fund the budget and then take the Chapter 70 money and then add it
I'm
on?
not saying you should level fund the budget. I really have a problem with that myself. But from where I look and I see the numbers and I see, you have this column and the things from this column are given to us from the state predicated on, if we all of a sudden had growth where we needed to buy, police cars, or we had to hire police officers, and the state gave us money for that, I wouldn't expect us to hire teachers.
But if healthcare costs rises 17%, then the portion of real estate tax revenues available to fund the healthcare budget on a proportional basis shrink.
Right, now I understand.
So how do you?
I absolutely understand that.
I guess, I don't mean to be argumentative, but I guess. You, okay, everybody's laughing. This is okay.
Give it 5 minutes.
Right. It's all.
I see what you're saying. What you're saying is you see it as one big sum that comes in as state aid, and it goes to wherever the town decides it wants to go. What I'm saying is it's coming in.
Not Chapter 7.
No,
I'm saying
no,
the
but
money comes in predicated on a need, it needs to meet the needs.
This by me.
but in its totality, it's being, I mean, you could argue that it's being used to fund the increase in the healthcare costs, which is for the staff. What is the total healthcare increase for the year?
700,000.
Is it 7, 5, 6, 7, 800,000?
Seven.
7? 700,000. Healthcare costs increased 700,000. No?
I will verify that, keep going on that assumption, because it's very close.
So healthcare costs rise 700,000 in total for the entire
Oh.
community.
I don't know.
There's how many employees in
That's
total?
employee benefits total.
Well, there's-
Employee benefits total. are
well, it's healthcare
700,000.
and Medicare, but it's gonna, that total package last year rose by 30%. So, I mean, I could say it's there. It's in that number, which is, and that's not even split proportionally 50-50.
I guess
You see what I'm saying? It's
what Carol's saying is, if state aid targeted at students, because of an increased enrollment in students, went up by 400,000 from last year. And for all intents and purposes, we have level funded budgets across the board, both sides, then the town contribution or town revenue contribution went down by 400,000. Well, we're asking to keep that level and let us recognize the 400 that the state's passed through.
But enrollment only went up by 17 students this year. The money isn't tied
I don't
directly.
work for the state, I don't decide how.
I'm just saying though, you know, we get back to, you know, they have built into the Department of Education, foundation budgets, net spending budgets. We're beyond all of those requirements. So in terms of the money that's being allocated, that the state requires, it's already there and beyond that. And in looking at the whole budget, to say that, well, just put it over on this side, as Mr. Murphy was pointing out, healthcare costs, that does go to the school budget even though it's in the municipal side. You know, so you can't just arbitrarily say that, well, everybody stays where they are and then add on this to that one department. It doesn't work
It's not
that way.
arbitrary to do that.
It is arbitrary.
The dollar amount is predicated on the number of students.
So are you saying then that we're in violation of the law of the way state
I don't know
monies
what the
are
law is.
allocated?
I don't know the law is, I just know what my logic is telling me.
Well,
And
but
if you're telling me I have
let's-
flawed logic,
what-
that's not the first time, but they just,
But again, let's go back to my analogy, right? If state aid is in a given year, $6 million,
yeah, okay.
nothing changes, except state aid goes from 6 million to 5 million. And chapter 70 goes from 2 million to 3 million. Does the school budget rise $1 million?
Absolutely. It's
But it's-
predicated on servicing students, yes.
I don't agree with that. This is bad.
I have to, well, I'm not arguing reallocation of the budget as it stands right now. I have to answer your question with a yes. I think it's the intent of what the state gives in aid. And if our aid went up, our overall aid went down $1 million, but our school aid went up $1 million, and the same happened in every community across the state, the intent is to do something with the educational system, and that's maybe to allow communities to prepare for MCAS or whatever it is across the whole state. And then if North Reading, if every state has if every town has their Chapter 78 increase proportionately to our $1 million, and some get more and some get less, and we decide not to give it to the school department, but every other community does, what have we done? We
Let me ask
put
you a
our
question.
school system in a
Let me ask you a
negative
question.
light.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Then if healthcare rises by $700,000, and we just call it a 50-50 split, even though it's not, do you agree that the school budget increased by $350,000?
Yes, but that,
Oh, there you go.
but that's not the way we look. The way
But-
we look at it, and maybe we should just go through the way we look at it. All our revenue, including state aid, is added together. And then the shared costs are taken off the top. That's why I'm not getting into exactly where it went here. The shared costs are taken off the top. And then, last year we split the budget 60-40. This year, we did it whatever other way we arrived at that. I'm not quite sure exactly what that was. But that is, that is how we calculated it. And there, there are shared costs.
Right, I
So
understand.
is the bottom line to the school department after you take off those shared costs, is it 300, is it 150? That's why I said I'm not gonna get into that right now,
But
because
no,
the way
but
we
that's
do it
part of
doesn't
the
help.
argument, if you're gonna say that the school budget needs to increase $300,000 because the increase in chapter 70 didn't go to the school department, but if healthcare costs rose by $700,000 and you split it 50-50, even though that's not the split of the increase, didn't the school budget in fact rise $350,000? Yes.
But
So
was
you
that
can't-
done on a conscious basis? I don't see that we have a methodology that makes that division done on a cognitive level. You know, it may have happened that way at this point, but the whole thing is predicated on the dreaded 60-40 split that's been here forever. And so you
I
can.
didn't build a budget on a 60-40 split.
But you built it
Anybody
based
Built
on.
But
it
it's
on
a
a
level-funded
level
budget.
funded a budget that was based on a 60-40 split last year.
Look, I don't know how else to say this, and I'm sorry Mrs. Barker left, but I'm gonna tell you. I didn't come up with the school number.
She
At the
came into
meeting, they gave, at the finance planning team meeting, I said, where are you at with the school number? And they said, it's level funded plus 45.
All right, hypothetically speaking, if she had come into the financial planning meeting and said, I need another 300,000 to save 9 jobs, can we tap cash reserves or some other funding source, what would your response have been?
I would have said, as I say, whenever we talk, even when we talked about the 190, you have to understand, Friday morning, there was 110, exclusive of what general government wanted to do with the library and the 45,000 they were looking for. So we were in a $190,000 hole that we dug out of, thankfully. But if they came in and said that, if they wanted to tap stabilization or free cash, I would recommend against that because of where we're headed. I think that's the free cash level in this community has continued to decline over the years. The budget has continued to be squeezed on all sides, and free cash is merely generated from either excess revenues or residual expenses that get turned back in. And as we continue to ratchet down the budgets, then that free cash number continues to decline.
So you would have
If
said,
you-
well, they took cuts last year, maybe it's time for us to look at cuts this year? Townside? Now, the school department took cuts last year. They lost people last year.
I'm not gonna cut people just to cut people. I don't
Well,
understand.
we had to on the school side.
I'm not gonna just cut people.
Okay.
I'm not gonna do it. Mr. Simon.
I appreciate, certainly, as you said earlier, that, you know, your volunteers, this is not a pretty process. You did your best shot. And I want to be the last person to beat up on people who volunteer for working in this town. This is not a pretty process, this budget process. But I have to say that I'm very disappointed with how it went this year. I do not share your pride with how this went. And you set probably a too optimistic goal for yourself last year when you talked about that the budget process would start in July. I'm sure you regretted that one the moment you said it. But you know, even November or December would have been a pretty good start to this. And I guess I have to say, you know, I wouldn't expect cutting for cutting's sake for a person that's doing a direct service. But I was very encouraged when I heard about this benchmarking project. I was very disappointed with how late it ended up happening, that information I didn't see the level of scrutiny of budgets that I would have expected, particularly on the budgets that were that much over the benchmark. I didn't come here, but I did my best to watch how the discussions went, and I was frankly very disappointed. And I think there's a difference between saying, you know, some person who does a specific job gets cut, to take a real hard look at overtime, which is different than laying somebody off. It's somehow finding a way to cut down salary expenses on the government side without somebody losing a job. So I don't think it's quite fair to say by cutting salary, for example, you're necessarily sending some, you know, poor person out onto the street who doesn't have a job.
And we cut a lot of the overtime,
Well,
as well as people's hours.
I'm not gonna pretend to know enough about police and fire and other budgets that have overtime. So I'm not gonna say whether you cut enough or you didn't, but I guess all I can observe is